All right, welcome to this explainer on the LM2500. Today, we're taking a really close look at an incredible piece of engineering, an aeroderivative machine that manages to pack a massive 28,500 horsepower right into the footprint of a standard shipping container. Now, if you're a field engineer, a technician, or a commissioning specialist out there working on these dual-shaft packages, you are in the exact right place.
But right off the bat, I want you to think about something. How easily do you think you could destroy a $10 million turbine with just one single operational mistake? Well, the scary reality is, incredibly easily. So you can think of this explainer as your high-stakes survival guide. We're going to walk through exactly what happens if you try to restart this machine too soon, skip one of those seemingly mundane daily checks, or even just wash it at the wrong temperature. To get there, we'll quickly run through the architecture, talk about starting and fuel systems, dive into lubrication, go over some critical lockout rules, and finally, wrap up with the maintenance program.
Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, looking at the architecture and core of this two-shaft design.
So, mechanically speaking, you're essentially dealing with a commercial jet engine that happens to be bolted securely to a concrete pad. You guys already know the Brayton cycle, but remember, unlike a reciprocating engine, this gas turbine is running all four of those stages, the suck, squeeze, bang, and blow, continuously and all at exactly the same time. Air is constantly being pulled into the front, hot gas blasts out the back, and that gives us this beautifully smooth, highly throttleable power.
Now here's a fun engineering puzzle for you. At full load, what's actually spinning faster, the jet core of the engine or the generator it's driving? Because think about it, the hot core can wildly fluctuate all the way up to 10,000 RPM, depending on what the load demands. But it has to drive a generator that is locked in at a totally dead steady 3,600 RPM for the electrical grid. So how on earth do they manage that without the whole thing just tearing itself apart?
The secret here is aerodynamic coupling. There is absolutely zero physical metal shaft connecting the gas generator section over to the power turbine section. None. Instead, the gas generator just blasts a massive high-velocity stream of hot gas, and the power turbine acts like a giant windmill catching that exact stream to turn the generator. Because they aren't bolted together, the power turbine stays steady at 3,600 while the gas generator revs up and down on its own. It's a brilliant design, and it completely eliminates the need for some massive, heavy speed-reducing gearbox.
Moving right along to Section 2, let's look at how we wake this giant up, and a major fuel hazard you need to avoid. Now, you definitely don't start thousands of pounds of cold metal by just turning a key. It takes a heavy-duty hydraulic starter. But listen, here is an absolute, non-negotiable rule out in the field. Never, ever engage that starter if the compressor rotor is spinning at more than 300 RPM. If that shaft is just freely windmilling and you hit the starter, you will literally shear the gearbox spline drives in under a second. Honestly, it's one of the fastest, most expensive rookie mistakes you can make on site.
So once it's safely spinning, we bring in the fuel. Now this package handles natural gas or liquid fuel, but if you're running on liquid fuel, you have got to watch out for what's called the coking trap during your shutdown. If you hit stop and don't confirm that the liquid fuel manifold fully drained out, that leftover fuel just sits there in the hot nozzles. The residual heat literally bakes it into hard carbon. That's the coking process. And that baked carbon ruins your spray pattern for the next start, turning a perfectly normal shutdown into a multi-thousand-dollar nozzle replacement job.
Let's move into Section 3 and talk about the lifeblood of this machine, lubrication, cooling, and some strict thermal limits. While fuel is what gives the engine life, oil is quite literally the only thing standing between a smoothly running machine and totally seized metal. And here's the thing, it actually runs two totally independent oil systems that never ever mix. You've got your turbine lube oil, the TLO, which uses a high-end synthetic oil to handle extreme heat and requires a crazy strict lab-level cleanliness standard. Then you have the generator lube oil, or GLO. That uses standard mineral oil because the bearings run much cooler, so it gets a looser cleanliness code. Treat them as two entirely different risk profiles.
So, what happens to those bearings if your plant suffers a total blackout? Well, the AC power dies, meaning your main lube pumps instantly shut off. But that massive generator rotor, it has so much inertia, it's still coasting down from 3,600 RPM. Without oil, it would tear its own bearings apart in seconds. That's exactly why we have overhead rundown tanks. Honestly, it's a beautifully dumb mechanical backup. Pure gravity just feeds stored oil straight down into those bearings during the coast down. No electricity needed whatsoever. When the lights go out, physical gravity beats a smart electrical system every single time.
On the cooling side, you'll periodically need to wash the compressor blades to get rid of accumulated dirt and salt. But please, burn this number into your memory. 200 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're running an offline, deep clean crank soak wash, the outer casing must be below 200 degrees. If you spray cold wash solution onto a hot casing, you'll cause instant thermal shock. That can permanently warp the metal, meaning you're going to have catastrophic blade rubs the very next time you fire it up.
All right, heading into Section 4, let's talk about lockout rules and some hazards that are completely invisible.
You know, the absolute most expensive mistake you can make right after a high-powered trip basically comes down to the physics of how things cool off. Think about it. After a trip, that thin outer casing cools down and shrinks really, really fast. But the heavy, thick rotor core spinning inside, that stays glowing hot and expanded for way longer. And that mismatch in cooling rates causes the internal clearances between your blade tips and the casing to shrink up dangerously tight.
Because of that shrinkage, here is the golden rule. If the engine trips, you have a roughly 10-minute window to start a low-speed motoring cycle. This pushes cool air through the engine to stabilize those tight clearances. Now, if you miss that 10-minute window, the control system hits you with a mandatory 4-hour lockout. It absolutely will not let you restart the engine for 4 hours, and guys, this isn't a glitch. It's a critical safety feature designed to stop you from grinding an expanded rotor right into a shrunken casing.
There's also a very sneaky trap you have to watch out for when the engine is just sitting there off, and that's nearby welding. If someone is doing unauthorized welding near the package and they don't ground it properly, stray electrical current can jump right through the unpowered turbine rotor. That stray current arcs across the tiny, microscopic clearances inside the bearings. It causes this invisible pitting and brittling. You won't even know what happened, but that bearing is basically guaranteed to fail right after your next restart.
And finally, Section 5. Let's talk about the maintenance program and how we actually track the health of this machine.
So how do we keep an engineering marvel like this running without just randomly tearing it apart because a calendar says so? We use on-condition maintenance. There are no fixed interval overhauls here. Every single maintenance action is triggered by hard evidence, mainly high-res images from a borescope snaked into the engine and real-time vibration data. Based on that evidence, your repairs fall into 3 buckets. Level 1 for simple on-site fixes, Level 2 for swapping modular sections, or Level 3, which is the big one, a full off-site shop restoration.
But to actually gather that evidence, you have to strictly respect the maintenance clock. You check fast-moving risks, like active oil leaks, every single day. Medium-speed trends, like vibration shifts, get checked weekly, and slow-developing wear, like those internal borescope inspections, are tracked by running hours. If you start skipping those boring daily checks, you are completely throwing away your early warning system for fast, catastrophic failures.
Speaking of tracking vibration data, here's a field tip that might just save you a minor heart attack. Getting a high vibration alarm on your monitoring rack isn't automatically a mechanical disaster. Believe it or not, sometimes it's just electrical noise from a slightly loose thumb screw on the front panel of the monitoring module, interrupting the chassis ground. So always check the physical security of your instruments before you assume the turbine bearings are failing.
You also have to keep up with the safety sensors inside the enclosure, like the combustible gas detectors. The calibration process is pretty standard. You warm them up, set the 0 with clean air, and set the span with a known test gas. But here's the catch. That entire sequence has to happen within a strict 12-minute window. If the clock runs out, the system safely aborts and just reverts to its old settings. That way, a life safety sensor is never left hanging in some dangerous, half-calibrated state.
Which really brings us to the big takeaway for safely operating this machine. Whether we're dealing with thermal shock from cold wash water, coking in the fuel lines, stray welding arcs, or the rotor lockout system, true danger often lurks in what happens after you hit the shutdown button. So, as you pack up for your next site visit, I'll leave you with this. Are you going to run this 28,500 horsepower machine perfectly by the numbers, respecting every temperature limit, speed threshold, and daily check? Or is your next casual assumption going to be the one that triggers a massive unplanned Level 3 shop restoration? Remember, the evidence and the engine will always tell the tale. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep learning and stay safe out there.